Hey there, kitten. This episode of Tatefacts is sponsored by Uncomfortaphone, the most uncomfortable listening experience money can buy. Do you want something naughty? How about all of your least favourite words in a faint, whispery voice? Moist, pustule, discharge, flaccid, salmonella. What about listening to someone explain technology over the phone to one of your elderly relatives? So just click the button that says menu. The button that says menu, Grandad.
I've tried it, Chuck, nothing's happening.
The button that says... Is the TV on, Grandad?
Oh wait, no, should it be?
Or if you want to be really bad, how about the same elderly relative sharing uncomfortably racist opinions at the dinner table?
No, I'm not saying all foreigners are bad, just the smelly ones.
Uncomfortaphone. Call now, and I'll stop eating this apple right next to the microphone. That's a good apple, actually. I should eat more of these. Silicon is the second of the group 14 elements, and like its daintier sister carbon, its chemistry is so nightmarishly difficult to summarise that to get through a first draft of my script, you'd need about 3 weeks of rations and an oxygen canister. Silicon and oxygen are two of the most common elements on the planet, and their compounds make up an enormous 90% of the Earth's crust. The most common silicon-oxygen compound is silicon dioxide, more commonly known to both geologists and Minecraft YouTubers as quartz. Pure quartz crystals can be found in nature, but it's much easier to find as the primary component in sand. The other components being a medley of rocks, mineral particles, and heroin needles. So what can you do with sand other than building little castles and ruining beachside picnics? Well, you see guys, sand is non-toxic and has useful properties if handled correctly. It largely consists of silicon dioxide, which has abundant oxygen and silicon. The pyramids are made out of sand. I like the pyramids because they used slaves to build masonry. Sand is another type of sand. While I was writing the script, I forgot to talk about Oh Christ, I can't do this. Look, sand is fine, okay? It's perfectly adequate silicon compound, 7 out of 10. But the second I start listing off its properties like a 1930s geography teacher, my eyes begin to glaze over like the marzipan on the world's dullest Christmas cake. But that's the good thing about being a chemist. If a substance is too boring, just do some science on it until it stops being boring, or start setting things on fire, whichever comes first, honestly. Due to the strong silicon-oxygen bonds keeping its crystal structure together, you have to heat sand to around 1700 degrees to melt it when it's pure. But by mixing it with limestone and soda ash, this melting point is significantly lowered, and you can melt the mixture to make glass, or soda lime glass, which you'll remember from the Bourne episode if you got through it without being put off by my terrible Yorkshire accent. For those of you with an eye for architecture, you may have spotted that glass in old buildings usually pools to the bottom of the window frames. One explanation for this, sometimes given by well-meaning history teachers, is that glass is actually a very slow-moving liquid, and the pooling at the bottom is the result of glass slowly inching to the bottom of the frame over hundreds of years. Well, turns out this explanation is hilariously wrong and deserves to be gouged from the brains of every humanities student with an ice cream scoop. Glass is a solid. The jumbled lattice of silicon-oxygen bonds keeping it together are too strong to let the atoms slide over each other like they would in a liquid. We still have telescope lenses from centuries ago that work perfectly well when even the slightest degree of melting would make them totally unusable. The reason glass in church windows is thicker at the bottom is simply because back in the day, making perfectly uniform glass was actually quite hard. So when it inevitably formed incorrectly, the labourers would just plop the thickest bits at the bottom. No big deal, not like it'll lead to generations of adults questioning everything they ever learned in primary school or anything. Like carbon, silicon is a crucial element in plastic chemistry. Under the right conditions, units called siloxane groups can form enormous chains of silicon-oxygen bonds, usually with hydrocarbon groups jutting from the chains, like the spines of the world's most elongated hedgehog. Plastics made from these units are technically called polymerized siloxanes, but because synthetic chemists love to make life difficult for themselves, they're more commonly known as silicones. Just a reminder, silicon without the E is the element, silicone with the E specifically refers to plastics with a silicon-oxygen backbone. Nearly identical words, guys, can't imagine people mixing those ones up. Hard plasticky silicones are often used in the catering industry for things like ice cube trays and reusable plastic straws, as opposed to old-fashioned disposable straws made of the carbon polymer polypropylene, currently occupying about half the Indian Ocean. Silicone gels, on the other hand, are often used in the healthcare industry as fillings for things like contact lenses and breast implants. And yes, fine, let's address the big horny elephant in the room. Due to its non-toxicity and easiness to clean, medical grade silicone is also used to make sex toys. There. You're happy now, I've debased myself into talking about such lowbrow smut on my own channel. Stop snickering, Perkins, there's nothing the least bit funny about enormous floppy willies. Now, I'm not insinuating for a second any of you own sex toys, we're all good Christians here, right boys and girls, but just in case any of you have given yourselves over to sin, you might want to make sure you're storing them properly. There's a rule of thumb in polymer chemistry that like dissolves like. If two silicone objects remain in contact with each other for extended periods of time, the polymer chains will effectively melt into each other. So if any of you have strayed from the eternal glory of Jesus, just make sure you store your implements of sin in different boxes or separate them with clean towels. How come you know so much about sex toys, Max? Look, I'm a chemist, okay? Get your mind out the gutter. I did polymer chemistry to death as an undergrad, and I assure you it was about as sexy as watching a homeless man picking lint out of his belly button. When it comes to conducting electricity, chemical compounds are usually separated into three classes. At the top, we have conductors, materials like metals that conduct electricity very well, and at the bottom, we have insulators, materials like rubber that conduct electricity about as well as a man with no arms or legs would conduct the London Philharmonic Orchestra. The materials in the middle are known as semiconductors, and silicon, surprise surprise, is one of them. What makes semiconductors so useful in materials chemistry is that depending on their purity, their conductivity can be changed. In the 50s and 60s, scientists realised this property could be exploited in circuitry design by using silicon in transistors, tiny electrical devices that can amplify electrical signals. Transistors allowed engineers to build circuits that were much smaller and electrically efficient than previously feasible, paving the way for devices like pocket calculators and handheld radios. Once big business caught on, interest in silicon chemistry exploded. The development of the silicon microchip in the late 20th century triggered a tidal wave of technological progress never before seen in human history. Silicon chemistry is the driving force behind every computer and mobile phone on Earth, and even a few off of Earth if we're counting the workstations on the International Space Station. It's also the namesake of Silicon Valley, an area in southern San Francisco home to Apple, Google, Facebook, and every other cartoonishly sinister tech company one orbital death laser away from being the baddies in an Austin Powers film. Now, the regal queen of Group 14 is, and always will be, carbon. Kind of earned it with the whole responsible for all life on Earth deal. But as second place goes, ushering humanity into a new era of technological progress isn't too shabby. I mean, look what silicon chemistry gave us. Mobile phones, laptops, and Mark Zuckerberg. Oh god, we've gone too far. Go back, go back, go back, go back!